Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video, this time on the Druk My Niet 2015 Malbec. In this video we're continuing our deep dive into Malbec in South Africa, and this was in fact the oldest wine to be entered into the 2021 Malbec Challenge. And I believe it was the 6 years from harvest, in fact, that elevated this bottle just a little bit beyond its peers and into that gold medal zone. Of course, if you've been watching the other videos that I've made on Malbec, you'll be asking the question, but which style is it? Is it the tutti fruity berry fruit forward, or is it the inky blueberry and plum icon style? And as I've said, you can use ABV as at least a guide to make an educated guess as to which style a Malbec might be if you know nothing about the producer. So this particular Druk My Niet Malbec is a 14.5% alcohol wine, which does put it firmly in the icon style Malbec. And when you crack this guy, you will see that that's exactly what it is. But as I hinted at earlier, it has had a lot of time in bottle, more than any of its competitors. And so what might have at one point be a slightly overly powerful inky wine has now softened and been rounded into what is a beautifully integrated wine with just a hint of age on it. But in this video I wanted to take a little step back from the Druk My Niet Malbec and talk about Malbec as a cultivar. Elsewhere, I have described Malbec as having thick skins which deliver a huge amount of inky color. And this can be true, but having taken a slightly closer look and talked to people who know far more than me, like Professor Lorraine Geldnys from Elsenburg or Charles Visser, the head of Vititech, we can learn that Malbec has moderately thick skins, but the problem is that it can also produce very big berries, and this will reduce the fruit to skin ratio. And too low a ratio between skins to fruit can lead to a lack of concentration. This is especially true if you take vineyards that are perhaps planted in fertile alluvial soils on the bottom of a valley, ideal conditions for a plant to grow vigorously. What you then have is a Malbec that fruits prodigiously, loads and loads of bunches, big berries, and low concentration. But the interesting thing to note is that the choice of clone that a farmer plants, i.e. the type of Malbec that they choose to plant, can have a huge impact on how much fruit is yielded by the vine, which in turn can affect concentration. Now, there are a number of clones at work in South Africa. There's clone 598, which is a moderate yielder. There's clone 46, which produces a huge amount of fruit, which causes the problem we just discussed. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have clone number 1, which hardly delivers any fruit at all, but gives you massive concentration. And you think, well, that would be amazing, unless, of course, you're a grape farmer trying to pay the rent, in which case something that gives you almost no fruit is a tough sell. Interestingly, given that Argentina is supposed to be where all the world's best Malbec comes from, South Africa only has one Argentine clone in cultivation at the moment. That is K71. Now, K71 can fruit quite vigorously, which is good for a commercial farmer who is wanting to produce a large crop, but you can also get more concentrated results out of a K71 clone by farming in a certain way so as to green harvest or reduce the amount of fruit on the vine. So it is one of those cultivars that, if farmed right, can produce a very high level of quality, but if left unattended, goes the same way as something like clone 46, which just delivers loads of low concentrated fruit. Now, all this talk of clones, aside from giving us an opportunity to bring in another Star Wars reference, can seem rather abstract. But I thought it was interesting to note that after I did a little bit of digging, I discovered that the vast majority of gold medal Malbecs in the 2021 Malbec Challenge all feature the majority component of K71 clone in their wines. I deliberately went and asked for some details about some of the lower scoring wines, and regularly again found that there was no K71 amongst the lower scoring wines. So this is not a hard and fast rule that K71 is the best, but it is interesting to note that amongst the highest scoring wines, K71 was by a landslide the dominant clone in use. And of course, clone is not a magic bullet. Whenever I start going down one of these rabbit holes with winemakers and start talking about a particular yeast strain or a particular clone, they get very upset and say, no, but you must come back and understand that site is by far the most important thing in a wine. And of course, this is true. All I'd like to say is if there are a number of variables that we can focus on, and we're going to pick the perfect site, we may as well take a step further and make sure we plant the right clone as well. There's some guys in Argentina who are currently doing research with sort of 3,000 clones of Malbec, and then they brought it down to 64 or 128. I can't remember the numbers, but I'm going to do a whole piece just on that alone because it's fascinating to see how much work these guys are putting into making sure that their genetic material is correct. And perhaps it's also worth noting that clonal selection may be one of the factors that explains the divergent styles of Malbec we see emerging in South Africa. I would love to spend more time talking about it now, but I feel like I'm going to start eating into drinking time, right? Because this Druk My Niet 2015 Malbec is not getting any younger, and you need to get in there. If you're watching this on the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date with the more adventurous side of South African wine, exploring some unusual cultivars, as well as learning about what our most exciting winemakers are up to each vintage.